Alright guys, I'm here back with a new video, and in this video I'm back with another season ranking for Big Brother, where last year, after 5 years, I redid my season rankings for Big Brother US and BBCAN. However, now, a year after that, let's redo another of my Big Brother season rankings. This one, mixing those two lists together and making my North American season rankings for Big Brother, where, again, here, obviously, I'll be taking my Big Brother US season ranking, my BBCAN season ranking, and mixing them together, along with also just saying, screw it, and adding in the spin-offs here as well, because why not? When else am I going to talk about the spin-offs? Which will obviously be the 3 celebrity seasons, OTT and Reindeer Games, to where with that, we have 43 seasons to be ranking here. And straight up, probably not going to go as detailed into each individual season, especially the ones that I've talked about beforehand, as I did in those respective season rankings. Again, if you want to hear my more detailed thoughts, go to those videos. This one, and we'll be kind of speeding it up just because I have a lot of seasons to talk about. And again, I've already talked through all these. But anyway, we got 43 seasons to rank here. Let's start off at number 43. My least favorite season of Big Brother of all time is still Big Brother 1. And again, that's not really going to change. I mean, Big Brother 1 is just such a drag to watch. And to be fair, I've not rewatched it in well over a decade. Essentially, when I got back into Big Brother, I watched it one time and never rewatched it since. And again, maybe I'll be doing that some point down the road for a video. But again, at this current point, I cannot really imagine the rewatch of BB1 being fun. Again, it's a season that is just so long with almost nothing really happening throughout all of it. Obviously, it's a different game than what we currently have, and just in general, the premise of the show isn't as intriguing to me as the modern Big Brother. And I think if you are going to have a season with this sort of format, I think the appeal to it is having a lot of drama and wacky characters. And BB1 didn't really have that much of that either, to where, again, I just think BB1's a pretty bad season here at 43. Now at 42, we're actually already getting to a season that I've not talked about in a ranking beforehand. And that season is Celebrity Big Brother 3. And Celebrity Big Brother 3 turned out to be a pretty bearable season after, again, I used to not like Celebrity Big Brother 2, but we'll later talk about the ranking. But again, 2 solid Celebrity Big Brother seasons. They'll be deeper into the list. But Celebrity Big Brother 3 is just one that is very void of fun. I feel like when you think of this season, I think you very much overall think about the negativity that surrounded Todrick, and you got the entire, like, Shayna situation, which was not fun to watch. And beyond that, again, you do have some pretty stagnant gameplay where Todrick and Misha just run the show from beginning to end. Now, again, there's technically a point where there's a little bit of intrigue in the sense that, like, Kurt Kirkpatrick essentially gets himself nominated. So, again, that was kind of fun, but really outside that, again, it's a pretty dreadful season. No real fun to be had from it outside of, again, like, Carson being, like, an interesting character at first, even though, again, he becomes a very frustrating player. But, again, it was just a steamroll from beginning to end with very little intrigue. That's why it's here at number 42. And number 41, moving to a Big Brother Canada season, the lowest BBCAN season on the list, we have BBCAN 8. Obviously, a season that never finished. The season that got canceled midway through due to COVID, and a season that had only one real elimination along the entire month that the season was on. Yet, despite that, it did have fun at points of BBCAN 8 in comparison to the last few seasons. While obviously by the end of it, there's a lot of negativity. Again, Nico quits right away. You have the entire Jamar Kyle situation, and then you got Carol quitting at the end. I think it seemed like a season that there was this potential that there was going to be this interesting gameplay that just sadly never got to the point where that could come to a head. But beyond that, also, you do have fun characters like Chris Wiley, who's an insane character, and him forgetting about his mom is still an iconic moment. I've always liked Brooke and Sheldon and was very disappointed to see them not culminate their runs. And also, I do think the finale is probably one of the best episodes of any Big Brother series, where obviously it's tragic in the fact that the game gets canceled midway through. But I do think just seeing the despair from these players and the way that the episode is edited is something that I do think is nearly unmatched across Big Brother. Where, again, I think there are strong suits here. But again, at the end of the day, BBCAN 8 is still a bad season. It's here at number 41. Now, number 40, we're finally getting to our first proper Big Brother US season, the one that is, again, dreadful to watch, and that is BB22, obviously BB All-Stars. And again, this was my lowest ranked normal Big Brother US season, and I stuck by it. I do think BB22 is a season that, again, just was not fun. I think by the end of it, it just became such a dreadful experience watching live, to where it was just such a steamroll, obviously, where Cody was going to win, to where he pretty much had the game on lock from the time that, like, the jury phase on, and really beyond that, pretty much the same people were winning competitions that allowed the committee to just steamroll. Now, again, we got that one glimmer of Davon's veto win, which was interesting, but even then it culminates to just Ian going home, which is like, Also beyond that, you had the entire, like, Christmas, like, Bailey Davon feud, which was very icky. Also, you had Tyler wanting to quit the game, which was also not fun. Where, again, not a particularly fun season. It's here at number 40. Now, number 39, moving on, we got BB2. And again, I've always found BB2 to be kind of dull, and I feel like every rewatch I do of it, which I've rewatched it twice. It's the time I started this channel. I feel like each time I watch it, my opinion of it goes lower and lower to where, again, it's just kind of a drag. Again, there's not much really going on. And the weeks kind of get stale, just the fact that, again, there's no veto. There's not really much shifting in the gameplay of the week to where, again, we get a lot of, like, focus on the individual characters, which I can understand the intrigue in that. But, again, I think when the gameplay is so mundane, it ends up not being as interesting. And, again, I think, like, Will is pretty much the only thing that really makes the TV product somewhat entertaining, where obviously Will is just an incredible character in his own right. But when we're looking at the TV product, I just simply do not think it's that fun of a rewatch, which is why it's here at number 39. At number 38, we're moving back to BBCAN already for a season that was not the greatest at the time it was airing, though, to be fair, I do feel like the season, again, I've not rewatched in a bit, and I feel like that has kind of lowered my opinion on it even more. But either way, at number 38, I do have BBCAN 7. And again, BBCAN 7 is a season that, at the time, obviously, it was just a season that the Pretty Boys dominated. While there was, like, some conflicts, but again, at the end of the day, it still ended up being a pretty easy steamroll for the Pretty Boys. They get to the Final 5, and we did have a very chaotic Final 5 round. We do get some fun character moments here and there, from, like, Mackie blowing up his own game. We get Kaylin's speech as she leaves. But really, it does end up being a pretty dull season with a pretty bad cast, where I would say outside of the Pretty Boys, most of the rest of the cast is largely forgettable. Though, again, I do think the season picks up towards the end. Again, the Final 5 round is very interesting. The Final 4, Adam's eviction, is probably one of my favorite scenes in BBCAN. So again, it was still largely a steamroll, and one that had a largely lacking cast, especially for Big Brother Canada, to where by the end of it for me, I do have it here at number 38. Now, number 37, we're moving back to Big Brother US, and actually moving back to Big Brother US for a while. And here we're starting it off with BB16. And BB16 is a season that obviously a lot of people love. It's a lot of people's first season. I personally don't like it. And to be fair, it's a season that I probably liked a lot more at the time. I think at the time, again, as it was going, while it was a steamroll for Derek, there's still a lot of fun character stuff happening around that. However, I think in retrospect, again, it's a season that kind of just feels soulless to a degree. I mean, yeah, you do have the likes of Zach, who's a fun character. You do have, again, the Frankie winning the challenge on his own. That's an interesting moment. You have obviously the first few weeks with Devin running rampant. But really, outside that, I do feel like the season's just kind of a drag. It's kind of just, again, this steamroll for Derek. Not much of intrigue really going on, where, again, there are, like, some interesting characters here and there, but I do feel like as a whole, this season just does not hold up. And I think back on it, and to be fair, I've not rewatched it in the last, like, 5 years, where maybe my opinion changes if I go do a rewatch pretty soon, but I do feel like the lasting impact of the season is one that, again, I just don't think it's that good. But yeah, I think my lasting impression of the season is just that, again, it is a bit of a drag for a lot of it, to where, again, for me, here at number 37. Now number 36, we're moving on to a season, another one that I think a lot of people like more than I do. However, it's another season that is just not that interesting to me by the end of it, even though, again, there is obviously a big moment within it, and that is BB23. And again, BB23, obviously, again, the cookout, getting to the end, this great historic moment for the show. I do have a lot of admiration for what the cookout's able to do, especially from a more personal standpoint. However, when we're looking at this as a television product, I think it's a bad television product. Again, I think the season is very much void of interesting strategy, because obviously, again, because of the nature of the cookout, they're a group that essentially is working together as a 6-person group with no reason to really flip on each other, to where it made a lot of this, like, inner conflict within the cookout just kind of meaningless, because they're just going to go to the end with each other anyway. To where, again, a lot of the gameplay in the middle portion of the season in particular is just so mundane, because none of it really matters. Like, we're just going to get a cookout final 6 anyway. And again, while again, that is a good moment in its own right, I do think when looking at this from a gameplay perspective, the gameplay of it feels very mundane. And it's also even more frustrating because obviously the likes of Tiffany, the likes of Hannah, the likes of Kylan were better players on the season than the people that actually made it towards the end. And to see, like, someone like Tiffany, who again would have dominated this game even without the cookout there, and proceed to essentially sacrifice her game for the sake of going to the end of the cookout, and proceed to just be the first one out of it, was again very annoying to see. To where I do think at the end of the day, I do think BB23, I get people like this season, I get people like the cast, and I do think the cast is a largely affable one, but again, also one that doesn't really bring that much drama. Again, I mean, I think you got like Kylan, you got like Tiffany, Big D, Frenchie. I think outside that, it's a pretty normal cast in terms of not many confrontational figures, where again, I think BB23 is a season that does not click with me as much as most people, even though again, I do recognize the historical significance of it. Now, number 35, keeping my Big Brother list, we're going to BB4. Again, B4, a season that I hated back in the day after more recent rewatches, where again, I've rewatched it twice in the time that I started the channel. I think my opinion of it has gone up a bit. Again, not enough to where it's like actually a great season, as again, I think it is a pretty slow season, especially in the back portion of the season, where I think it starts off strong. I think there are some good moments within it, but again, I do think this season very much drags towards the end. And beyond that, again, it's not a particularly good like gameplay season outside of Jude and Allison. No one there is particularly interesting to watch from a gameplay front. And while again, there are some interesting characters here and there, it's a largely unlikely unlikable cast. Definitely probably the weakest cast of this era of the show. Along with it also just having like a bit of a negative tint over it. Where there were a lot of like very icky comments made across this season, where I think that also kind of bothers me as well. Where again, I think overall I'm kind of mixed on the season as a whole, but again, it's enough to be here number 35. Number 34, keeping my Big Brother US list, we got BB19. Again, BB19, a season that most people hate. I don't hate it as much as most people. I do think, again, yes, there is this massive negative tint over the middle portion of the season where Justin and Cody are being targeted. And again, it is also pretty stagnant from a gameplay perspective after the Ramsey vote, where again, Justin and Cody are just going out over the next few weeks. We got Mark and Elena going out afterwards. However, I think after that, the season does kind of pick up for me, largely as a like why Paul loses sort of season. And the fact that we get so much focus on Paul and Paul doing a lot to really control the game, but also doing it in a way that pisses off the jury and not really owning their game. And I feel like that's a lot of the intrigue in the back portion of the season. And also beyond that, I think the finale is probably one of the best episodes in the history of Big Brother. Where, I mean, first up, you got a great jury segment, but also you got the actual downfall of Paul and them proceeding to lose the game. I think is really interesting to see there. So again, it's a season that definitely has its slow points. It's definitely a season that is, again, just dominated by Paul, but I do think the fact that Paul loses by the end ends up increasing my opinion of the season to be here number 34. Now number 33, again, keeping with my Big Brother US list, we got BB21. And again, this is a season that is just kind of an icky season. It's a season that it's not particularly fun to watch. However, there is interesting gameplay within it. I think that becomes this big dilemma with the season as a whole, and the fact that there is this cast of very unlikable people and people that behave terribly on the season. So again, it becomes frustrating to watch because of that. However, when looking at it from a pure gameplay front, the game does become very interesting in the back half of the season, where the first half of the season is, again, pretty slow. Just a single alliance dominating things. And while, again, a few character moments here and there, again, it is definitely that. And also you got the camp comeback of it all, which was obviously a very bad look. But again, once we get to the jury phase, the game really picks up. Again, the game becomes very dynamic. And while it is, again, still annoying by the end that Jackson just wins out and wins the game at the very end, even though, again, I think he did do some good moves here and there, I still think it's, again, kind of a lackluster conclusion to the season where, again, overall still a season that I'm very much mixed on, though I do think for this ranking, it's here at number 33. Now number 32, another season that has a similar issue. Very icky season, but some interesting gameplay, and that season's BB15. And again, BB15 probably has the most icky content that we got on the show. And the entire bed flipping incident, obviously all the racist comments in the middle portion of the season is really terrible. That being said, I do think this is probably one of the most aggressive houses from a gameplay perspective. I feel like this is actually probably one of the houses with the most active players within it, and I think that led to some intrigue, particularly in the back portion of the season. We're really in the post-jury phase. I do feel like the game gets really interesting where, again, we get this Judd blindside, we get the flip on Helen, we get the flip on Amanda, we get the Alyssa double eviction, and there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the back portion of the season. The problem is that, again, it's surrounded by this ickiness that makes it very tough to parse out where to exactly land this season because again, I think you see a lot of people rank this towards the very bottom, and I fully understand that point of view. I do think that is something that would be fully justifiable, though I think for me, it's like, again, I do think the semblances of good that we get there are better than most of the seasons that we talked about so far, and again, with it just having a high level of gameplay. For me, again, it's at the end of the day, like similar to BB21. I think also my personal connection this season, where this is the first season that I fully watch feeds throughout the entirety of it, again, I think it's enough to put it a spot higher than it here at number 32. Now number 31, and now we're finally getting back to BBCAN. We're moving on to one of the more recent seasons on the board. Here we have BBCAN 11. And BBCAN 11 is a tough season because I think there are some massive strong suits to the season. I think the season actually started off pretty interesting, where there was this Bros Alliance that turned against each other right away, and we also get Zach quitting the game, which was this big explosive week where, again, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the beginning of the game. And even beyond that, the game does remain pretty dynamic throughout the entirety of it, to where again, I think if you're assessing this purely on gameplay and like how active the play was, I do think this probably should be a bit higher on the list. Though I think the thing that lowers it for me is, again, obviously Ty's comp run. I think Ty going on this massive comp run from the jury phase on, never having an opportunity for him to even leave the game until the final three, and at that point, I think Claudia essentially kind of give up and just taking him to the end was, again, just really frustrating to see. It's one of these seasons that, again, I came out of it just being very frustrated at how the season played out. That very inequitable comps allowed Ty to just kind of dominate the entire game in a spot where he had no real relationships. Everyone hated him at the start of his comp run. So again, I think it was a very frustrating season from that light, to where I think there are some good moments here and there. I think there's some good characters. I mean, Kuzi's an all-time great character, but I do think the frustrations that were there with the way that the end game played out was enough to put it here at number 31. Now, number 30, we're also keeping it in line with BBCAN in a season that is on a similar wavelength. I think these are, again, seasons that I would have back-to-back on any given list, and that is BBCAN 4. Now, again, I used to have BBCAN 4 higher. I remember like back in my original North American season ranking, it was actually like bordering top 10 if I remember right. I think it was somehow extremely high. Again, my opinion of it has definitely gone down over time though. I do think BBCAN 4 is a season that, again, does have very dynamic gameplay, and that's something I will give it some credit for. Again, we got the entire like mighty middle of it all early on. We got Tim and Cassandra doing some interesting things despite not really winning many of the competitions, though at the end of the day, I do think it's a season that, again, feels in line with BBCAN 11. Again, very frustrating to see the likes of the Pax Bros and Kelsey just win out towards the end and get to the end together. Beyond that, also, not a particularly likable cast. I think this is probably one of the worst BBCAN casts. Again, kind of in line with the likes of BBCAN 7, where not many people from this season end up being super notable in the grand scheme of the show, where really I think Cassandra and Tim are really the two standouts here, and a lot of the rest of the cast ends up being kind of forgettable from a modern day lens, where, again, I am having it above BBCAN 11 simply because I do feel like the gameplay at the beginning of the season was definitely really strong. And then even in the back portion of the season, we have stuff like the double eviction where the Pax Plus try to nominate themselves, which is interesting to see as well. Where, again, I think it is close to BBCAN 11, though I do think the highs are higher in BBCAN 4, which is why it's a spot higher here at number 30. At number 29, and we're moving back to the US show. Moving on to BB24. And BB24 is a season that is a bit tough to rank simply because obviously the outcome of the season is incredible. Again, the story of Taylor and her going on to win is just a really interesting story to see, especially from Big Brother of all shows. So that is something that kind of elevates the season in a spot where the rest of the season is not that great. I mean, there are good individual moments. Obviously, the leftover formation is still one of the greatest weeks of Big Brother in the history of the show. Beyond that, you have a pretty fluid endgame for a while. Monty just wins all the comps anyway, and there were some interesting dynamics happening there. The problem is that there's also a lot of ickiness on the season. That kind of taints it for me. Where, again, early on in the game, you obviously have the terrible treatment of Taylor across the first 3 weeks. You also have, like, the Paloma of it all. You have, again, Daniel Durston existing. Kyle's situation, where, again, there's a lot of ickiness there that I think kind of taints the season for me, though. Again, there are some high highs, and, again, the Taylor win is really incredible, which is enough to put it here at number 29. Now number 28. Moving on to another recent season of the show. We're moving on to BB25. And I would say BB25 is probably the most fluctuant season on this list for me, in the sense that I don't really know where I stand at BB25 anymore. Again, at the time that it finished, I was higher than most people on it. I think, again, I thought this was a very appropriate ranking at the time. So again, I ended up making that video immediately after BB25. And again, I felt like this was about right. I think it's a season that, again, has an incredible first half, especially from a feeds perspective. Really interesting gameplay going on. Again, a lot of waffling on what the vote was going to be. And also we culminated with the incredible Izzy eviction week. Though, after the Izzy eviction, the season sucks. And it really just goes completely downhill. With, again, Zombie Week. And again, we get Jag just winning almost every comp. Beyond that, we also get like a lot of negativity across the season from likes of Cameron and Jared and Matt, to where, again, I just think by the end, my opinion of the season is very much soured. To where, again, I debate how high this season should be. To where, again, I can see an argument it should be lower, probably closer to like the 15s and 21s of the world, maybe. But I do still feel like in comparison to BB24, I think I came out of the season feeling more positive about 25 than 24, even though, again, 24 had a better outcome. I feel like 25 had a better ride. And also a more interesting cast from my perspective, the where, again, BB24's cast is not my favorite in the world either. So again, I do think it still feels like I should have 25 above 24, which is why it's right here on the list, even though at the end of the day, this also does feel a little bit high for it. But either way, I do have BB25 here at number 28. Now 27, we're moving back to seasons that I have not talked about before. Finally talking about Celebrity Big Brother. At number 27, I do have Celebrity Big Brother 2. And again, Celebrity Big Brother 2 is a season that, my opinion, has started to shift around from where it was at the time of the season happening. Again, at the time of the season happening, and there was a lot of negativity surrounding the season. There was a lot of people treating each other terribly. And also, as a big Tom Green fan at the time, I did feel like it was kind of upsetting to see how poorly the others treated him. Also being a season with a lot of like terrible gameplay. Almost no one was actually playing well throughout the entire season. Though, again, there was just nothing for me to like at the time. I think as time goes on, I do respect a lot more aspects of the show. Again, I still think Tom Green's a really interesting character. I think Tamar is obviously an all-time great character. I think her winning is a very interesting result for the show. And you have like a lot of dynamic gameplay. Again, not such a strong gameplay, but again, a lot of flipping back and forth. So again, I think there's a lot more that I like from Celebrity Brother 2 than what I did at the time. I would still say it's not an elite season of the show. It's still, again, a condensed, like, fine order season of Big Brother. So again, I think I would probably be higher on it if, again, the level of gameplay was a bit higher, but there is still a lot of confrontations, a lot of good characters, and a pretty interesting result, which is what leaves it here at number 27. Now number 26. We're moving on to, what do you know, the last Celebrity Big Brother season on the list. We have Celebrity Big Brother 1. And Celebrity Big Brother 1 is a season that I was extremely high on at the time. I remember coming out of Celebrity Big Brother 1 thinking that this was one of the best Big Brother seasons ever. Again, such a great result for the first celebrity season of the show, and though gameplay is higher than what you would expect, I feel like they cast a lot more fans of Big Brother on this season than they do of future celebrity seasons, which, again, I came out of it being very high on the season. Now looking back on it, it's fine. I mean, I think it's a season that, again, I think is harmed in the fact that obviously it is a condensed season. Through that, it's very tough to really become that connected to the season as a whole. Again, as time goes on, it becomes a lot less memorable than obviously what it was at the time. Though I still think it's a very competent, shorter season of the show with some interesting gameplay. Again, a lot of fluidity, surprisingly, in how the game is played out. So again, I think at the end of the day, it's essentially like on par with Celebrity Big Brother 2, just with less negativity to it, and again, some more fans. So at least that's something. Where again, I have it here number 26. Number 25, we're moving on to a season that is probably one of the toughest to rank here. It's a season that has all-time great characters, all-time great character moments, but also really boring gameplay. And it, again, makes it tough to rank it, but at number 25, I do have BB12. And again, the first half of BB12 is incredible. Again, so many great character moments from the early portions of the season from the likes of Rachel and Brittany and, again, someone like Matt and Andrew Gordon. Again, I think there's a lot of interesting character stuff going on early in the game. The problem is that, one, again, the gameplay of it all is still pretty mundane throughout the entirety of it, and the house is just targeting Brenchel the entire time, and after they go, it just is an easy brigade steamroll. Even beyond that, the back half of the season is just not that interesting either. Again, once Rachel goes, I think you definitely feel like the entertainment value of the season significantly drops to where those last few rounds especially are just really dreadful to watch. But again, there are just such great character moments here that makes me elevate it a bit higher than the likes of, again, a BB16, BB23, as I think there's an argument that this season should be as low as those. But it's, again, also a season that I personally have a lot of connection to. It's a season that I remember loving when watching it live. And again, it's a season that I do like, even though I do think it's extremely flawed, to where, again, at the end of the day, I put it kind of towards the middle of the list here at number 25. Number 24, moving back to a spin-off season of the show, one that obviously the entire experience with it was very toxic, but I still come out of the experience looking at pretty highly, and at number 24, I have BBOTT. And BBOTT was just such a wild time to be in the Big Brother community. I mean, there was so much toxicity within the fandom, and obviously the house being split, there being the Ball Smashers and the Late Night Jamboree, and with the season having a lot of fan voting involved, it did lead to a lot of ugliness in the Twitter community from the season, but it was still a fun season despite that. Now again, gameplay wise, obviously there's not really much to gauge from this. A lot of the gameplay of the season was dictated by how the votes played out, but I also feel like that added some of the appeal to the season, especially considering how the fandom would kind of flip back and forth on who had the majority, where it didn't play out just to one single alliance's favor. It kind of went back and forth in that way. And through that, again, it made it a lot more interesting to watch. So where, again, this could have been an easy, boring steamroll. So again, if I do think there was no voting component of the game, it probably would have been, straight up. I do think it probably just would have been the Ball Smashers plus Monty and Cornbread probably just steamrolling the game. But instead, we got a lot more fluid of a game. We also got really great characters. I mean, again, Justin is still like an all-time great character that it's disappointing not to see him on any other reality show after this. You got the likes of like Shelby and Scott, and Alex Willett was a likable presence here. Danielle was a really interesting player, to where, again, I think there were a lot of really interesting personalities on this season, and along with the game playing out in a very dynamic way, it led to this actually being a very strong season. I think the issues come from the fact that, obviously, again, there's not much true gameplay to analyze, considering how the voting of it all kind of nullified a lot of the gameplay of the season. Still a fun season to look back on, and a season that I do have fun memories of watching at the time. So it's here at number 24. Now, number 23, we're moving back to BBCAN for a couple seasons here, starting it off with BBCAN 1. And BBCAN 1 is a season that I have a lot of nostalgia for. I remember when BBCAN started, was really excited, and I had a really fun experience watching the show back in the day. And again, having rewatched it more recently, I still hold a pretty high opinion of the season. And it's obviously not without its flaws. Obviously, there's a lot of growing pains, and there's a lot of points where it's like very questionable in terms of the authenticity of the game, but it's still a really fun season. It's still probably the most insane ending to any season ever. And it's a season that I just think at the end of the day is like kind of middle of the road, to where, again, it kind of fits that's around the middle of the list here at number 23. Number 22, moving on to another BBCAN season, a season that another one of the more difficult seasons to rank. That season is BBCAN 6. And again, BBCAN 6 is just a very strange season because I think the season very much varies depending on how you experienced it. Again, watching it from a feeds perspective, it was incredible. Again, the feeds were really great, having a lot of back and forth, having some really insane strategic plays across the season. If you watch the TV show, you don't really get any of that. You just get a lot of sponsored segments, a lot of more watered down storylines that were somewhat fabricated at points, to where, again, I think there's a big difference between the two. Now, I think in general, obviously, people would probably still like BBCAN 6 because it's a season of strong women, and we have an all-women final 2. We also have, again, a lot of other strong female players from the likes of like Allie, Olivia, Erica, to where, again, I think there is obviously stuff to still like, even from a TV perspective, but I do think a lot of the appeal of the season really did come from the feeds. And because that, again, I at one point had BBCAN 6 towards the bottom of the list, and because the TV product is terrible, especially in comparison to the feeds, though I think now I kind of come to this like kind of compromise where I think it's around the middle. Again, I think it's like, if we're solely ranking this on the feeds, I think it's probably like, I don't know, 10 spots higher, probably close to something like a BB18. Though if we're ranking this solely on the show, it's much lower. It's at best where BBCAN 4 and 11 are. Realistically, I think the TV product's even worse than something like BBCAN 7, where I think actually the TV product of that season is actually pretty decent considering the events of the season. But still, I think it's a tough season to assess. I think I kind of land in the middle of those two things, putting it here around number 22. At number 21, we're moving back to Big Brother US. Keeping my original list, we have Big Brother 3. And again, Big Brother 3, season I've always liked. Again, for an old school season of the show, I think it pretty much improves upon BB2 in every single way. I think it actually makes it into a decent TV product with, again, some great characters. Probably one of the best, like, old school casts of the show. While also, again, having some interesting gameplay with Danielle and Jason and the Secret Alliance, who also have, again, big gameplay moments from the Marcellus blindside and other votes like the Eric vote, the Tanya vote, which were these blindsides as well, where, again, it's a very fluid season, and it's probably the most, like, indicative season of old school Big Brother. I think if you wanted to show someone, like, the peak of old school Big Brother and what old school Big Brother kind of represented, I feel like BB3 would be a good pick there, where, again, even though I do have other older seasons higher on the list, I do feel like this season kind of encapsulates a lot of what old school Big Brother really was, to where, yeah, you do get some drama here and there, but you also do get some decent gameplay and some fun characters, to where, again, still some pacing issues as there is with old school Big Brother, but still a very solid one here, number 21. Now, number 20, moving on this season, again, I like more than most people. I have BB9, and again, BB9 season, I have a lot of nostalgia for. I remember rewatching this season over and over again when I got back into Big Brother. It's a pretty insane season. Yeah, it's not a particularly likable cast, and the overall level of gameplay is pretty low as well, but again, there is a pretty fun middle portion of the season. I think once the individual phase of the game starts, it is pretty fun for next few rounds, and while, again, there is the dumb till death do us part twist at the very beginning that kind of stifles gameplay, and as a whole, the cast is not particularly likable, I do still feel like I come out of this season looking at it pretty positively, though I understand people's frustrations with it. But again, for me, it's enough to be here at number 20. Now, number 19, we're moving on back to another BBCAN season. We're here, I have BBCAN 3, and BBCAN 3 is a season that is a very hyper strategic season. It's a season that has probably one of the most strategic casts in the history of the show. A season filled with super fans, people playing the game very hard. However, it's also a season that has the most twists any season has ever had. I think that becomes this big dichotomy with the season. The fact that, again, it has one of the most impressive casts from a gameplay perspective, but also has a season format that doesn't allow for that to really live up to its potential. However, despite that, I do think there are still some really insane moments from this season. I still love the triple eviction of this season. It's still one of my favorite moments in all of Big Brother. You also have the Jordan Parhar blindside, also one of my favorite moments in all of Big Brother. You have, again, just Godfrey in general as a character, which is a really fun presence on the show. Obviously, Sarah and Brittany were very likable presences on the show. Again, the game format definitely benefited them throughout the season. But again, I do think there's a lot to like here from BBCAN 3. Very likable cast, very gameplay-centric cast. While there are some frustrations in how the season ends up playing out, I do feel like it's still a pretty solid season by the end of it. So that's here, number 19. Now, number 18, we're actually moving on to a place where it has changed since my last US season ranking, a season that I've dropped a couple spots, a season that I do still have some nostalgia for, and I still think there are strong suits to the season. I think as time goes on, I've become lower and lower on the season, though, to be fair, I haven't rewatched it in a bit, and I will in a few years, so that'll be something. But again, at number 18, I do have Big Brother 8. And again, BB8 is a season that I do still think has some fun aspects to it. Again, America's Player, while very frustrating from a gameplay perspective, I thought was a very interesting dynamic to add to the show. You also have Jen Johnson as a character. Evil Dick, while very unlikable, I do think brought something to the show, to where he was obviously interesting casting despite being a very unlikable person. And I do think his win, while again very much felt like it was very much handed to him by production, it was still a spot where his storyline of him getting to the final 2 alongside Danielle is a really interesting storyline for a show. Now, the issue is that obviously we know post-show that doesn't work out and Dick is just a dick, but I do think when we're looking at the season on paper, I do think there is a lot to like here. But again, I do think as time goes on, I do lower on the season a bit, where I used to have it like near top 5, where I used to love BB-8. But again, I do think the, again, lowered level of gameplay on the season, a lot of how like the twists really mess with the gameplay of the season does lower my opinion of it to where, again, I do think having it around BBCAN 3 makes a lot of sense. I do think while the level of gameplay is lower on BB-8 than BBCAN 3, I think there's a lot more character moments, a lot more drama on BB-8, to where, again, I think it kind of levels each other out to where, and I have it here, number 18. Now, number 17, a season that I never liked as much as most people, but it's still a good season, solid modern season of the show. Number 17, I do have BB17, which, again, a lot of people talk about BB17 as, again, one of the best seasons of modern Big Brother, and again, I think it is good. I think it's, again, another one of the like best gameplay seasons of the show. I think the overall level of gameplay is higher than most given seasons. I think there are a decent amount of very solid players on the season. Obviously, Vanessa's on this season, who plays a very impressive game. However, I do think overall the season's legacy probably got a bit too high. I do think our parts of the season are kind of just boring. Well, while we do get a pretty solid early portion of the season, I do think the middle of the season is just a massive drag. And the portion of the season where we're losing like Becky and Johnny Mac for first time, and even the Meg eviction week ends up ending in kind of disappointment there. We get a double eviction. Again, I think that portion of the season is a pretty big drag. And along with that, even though I do think this is, again, a pretty good cast from a gameplay perspective, it's a cast that never really gelled with me. Or while, again, you do have, again, Steve having a very good win at the end, you have Vanessa, you have James, who is notable, and you obviously have Johnny Mac, and obviously early on you have Jason Devon. Again, Audrey is a good character, but also I think there's a lot of duds on the cast. Yeah, I don't think Becky was particularly interesting outside of her train story. I don't think Jackie brought that much to the table. Jeff didn't bring that much to the table. Meg was just kind of fine. Clay Honeycutt is a person. I never liked this season as much as most people, but again, it is a solid modern season of the show. Just one that I do think is probably a little bit overrated by the general community. Next up at number 16, and we're moving on to another older school season of the show, a season that I did recently rewatch, and I did enjoy my process rewatching it, even though, again, it has some hiccups. But at number 16, I do have Big Brother 5. And again, BB5 is a season that I have a lot of nostalgia for. It was my first season of the show that I watched as a kid and actually have memory of. It's a season that, again, I remember the entire insanity of Project DNA, the Cowboy Nokomis of it all, the twin twist, all that was so insane. The twin twist reveal is still one of my favorite moments in the history of the show. Beyond that, also, you have someone like Jace, who's a really insane character early on. You have someone like Diane, who's also a really fun presence. Nokomis as well. Marvin, while, again, very icky based on live feed stuff, again, is at least fun on the show. Now, again, you do get Drew winning, which kind of dull. You know, him cutting Diane is still a great moment there. And you do have a few weeks of, again, the twins going out, and there's not much intrigue in that. But I still think as a whole, I do like this season. I think the season starts off very strong. I think this entire, like, Fall of the Four Horsemen is this really interesting storyline, and then mixing that in the fact that the end portion of the season gets pretty dynamic in the last few rounds, I think is something that holds the season up for me, even though, again, there definitely is some ickiness and some slow points, but I still like the season as a whole. And it's here number 16. Now number 15, we're moving back to BBCAN, a season that I do find a bit tough to assess as well. I think this is another one of these seasons that I was very high on at the time. I think as time goes on, don't know where to really land it. At 15, I do have BBCAN 9. And again, I love BBCAN 9 when it was airing. It honestly felt like this breath of fresh air after, again, a few weaker BBCAN seasons. And again, it is still an incredible season, a very dynamic season, a season with a lot of hectic gameplay, a lot of waffling back and forth on things. Again, the fact that, like, Kiefer survives the back door is insane. The fact that Jed uses the veto on Beth and gets himself voted out of the game is pretty insane. And again, we get some fluid gameplay at the beginning with the LaToya vote off. And there is stuff to like here from BBCAN 9. I do think as time goes on, though, I think my just overall, like, memory of it kind of goes down. And while I do think the tie win was satisfying, I do think the lead up to that was not as interesting. Or I do feel like the final 5 on is not the most entertaining portion of the season, even though we do get some fights from, like, Ty versus Beth. But again, I think the season is overall, again, good. I do think it's tough for me to really gauge it amongst, like, the best of the best seasons, though. I think it's a season that had some fun characters, had some good gameplay moments, but I do think it's also a cast that a lot of it does not really stick. Sure, obviously you have Spicy V, obviously you have, again, like, Ty, Jed, Kiefer, but I feel like a lot of the rest of the cast has not really popped in the years since, to where, again, I think that's also something that maybe lowers my opinion on the season, to where, again, it's overall still a very good season. It's essentially starting this grouping where from this point on, I mean, these are seasons that I do think are legitimately good Big Brother seasons that I personally do really love, but I do think BBCAN 9 being at the bottom of them kind of makes sense to me. Now, number 14, we're moving on to a season that I actually haven't talked about on a season ranking yet. With this being the most recent BBCAN season, we got BBCAN 12. And for me, BBCAN 12 and BBCAN 9 are around the same level. I think they are very similar seasons. The fact that, again, very dynamic gameplay. I think BBCAN 9 probably has more like chaotic gameplay, but BBCAN 12 also has a lot of really interesting gameplay within it. I mean, like very early on, again, we get the Donna blindside, which is insane. We get Dennis being taken out by Vivek, and then Vivek going out immediately afterwards. We have the Kayla blindside. Then we have the Victoria blindside, which in the fight between Victoria and Anthony, which is probably one of the biggest fights in the show's history. Where, again, there's a lot to like from that front. Again, Anthony also having this kind of tragic downfall in the season, him taking Bailey and being demolished by her at the end. Where, again, I think there's a lot to like from BBCAN 12. Now, I think the one thing that is like maybe a bit of a negative here is I do think the experience watching the show is not particularly great. Obviously, again, with BBCAN 11 starting digital dailies, BBCAN 12 was a spot where I think we got like pretty extended periods of time where we just didn't know what was happening on the season. I think with also the TV schedule being a bit messed up, it kind of led to, and the overall enthusiasm for the season not really being there, which is a shame, especially because, again, the season itself is actually pretty strong. And again, I think it is on par with BBCAN 9. For right now, I'm going to have it above BBCAN 9. I do think right now I feel BBCAN 12 being a lot more memorable, though also, obviously, it just happened, where, again, that would also play a factor into things, where maybe down the road, some of the bigger moments from this season start to fade, and I switch this opinion, though. I think as of right now, BBCAN 12 and BBCAN 9 are, again, around the same, and I do think that the recency bias of it gives it a little bit of a edge to put your number 14. Now number 13, and this is a weird one here. The last spinoff on the board. At 13, I have Big Brother Reindeer Games. And again, this is insane, right? That Big Brother Reindeer Games this high on the list. Yeah, I do legitimately love Big Brother Reindeer Games. I've actually watched it twice. I watched it when it originally aired. I rewatched it a few months later, and I still loved it. Again, Big Brother Reindeer Games, I think, is actually a legitimately fun season of the show. And I think the tough thing about the ranking here is that it is a season that probably shouldn't even be on a ranking like this. It's a completely different show. And in general, I was not intending on putting Reindeer Games on a list initially, but I was like, well, if I'm putting the other spinoffs, I guess this is technically a spinoff that needs to be ranked then. But again, it feels weird to rank it because it doesn't really feel like Big Brother. It feels like a different show, but it's also still a fun show. So again, it was so cool to see a lot of these pretty big names coming back and doing these like really wacky challenges, but also beyond that, there's also some strategy to the game, shockingly so. I thought that was really interesting to see as well. I mean, obviously episode 3 in itself is an all-time great episode of Big Brother. Again, Reindeer Games is surprisingly great, and again, I think if we're just ranking it on pure entertainment value, I think there's an argument it could even be higher. I think the reason it's not is simply because, again, it's just not really a Big Brother season. It feels weird to put it like amongst the best of the best Big Brother seasons, but I do think it is legitimately a really fun product, which is why it's here at number 13. We're moving back to the US for a little bit, but actually there's some seasons that did shift around on my season ranking since the last time I did it, where this is a season that actually moved up a couple spots. This season was below the likes of BB5 and BB8, though as time goes on, I become higher and higher on this season, and at number 12, I do have Big Brother 18. And BB18, I think, is a season that just ages really well, and it's a season that I even liked at the time. I feel like the overall reception to the season at the time was very negative for some reason. I never really got it, though as time goes on, the more I look back on the season, the more positively I look at it. I think it is actually probably one of the best modern seasons. Again, I think when people say that BB17 is the best modern season, I think 18 is better than 17. And I think 18 is a much more dynamic season throughout the entirety of it. And there's a lot more shifting alliances on the season, a lot more power shifts, and also a lot more drama, to where really for me, I feel like 18 is above 17 pretty much every single way. I think we also get, like, again, a really dynamic end game, a really interesting result in Nicole beating Paul on the 5-4 vote. Beyond that, you have like the fall of Paulo Calafiore, you have Victor's second eviction week, which I always found to be a really interesting one, where he almost ends up staying there. You have this entire underdog run for Paul, which was really interesting to see. You also have this like feud between Frank, Devon, and Tiffany, which led to a really explosive early game. And I think there's a lot to like from BB18. I never really got why people didn't like BB18 at the time, and I just think as time goes on, I get higher and higher on it. So again, for me, it's here number 12. Now number 11. Moving on to a season that actually moved down a spot since the last ranking I did, though really just swapped with the season that was below it, but still at number 11, a season that went down a bit here, we do have BB13. And BB13 is a season that straight up quality-wise, it is not this high. I think it is a season that, based on raw quality of the season, it's definitely below 18. It's probably closer to the likes of BB8, BB9. However, I really like BB13. It's a season that, again, I have a lot of nostalgia for. This is when I was really getting super into the show. The first time I ever looked into the online community, saw what was happening on the feeds, to where, and BB13 is a season that I have a lot of nostalgia for. Also, I was a big Brenchel fan at the time, and again, obviously, this leading to a Rachel win was really interesting to see as well. And also, again, it's a fun character season. Again, you have a lot from Rachel, you have a lot from Danny Donato, who has a really good underdog run here. And it's obviously a bad gameplay season, and again, there's obviously a lot of twists that mess with things, but even then, I still think Jeff going on to double eviction is one of the best moments in the history of the show. And also you have like Lawan taking himself out. I think there's a lot to like here. I do get why people don't like it. I do think there are, again, a lot of twists that in the way of things. It's not a particularly high gameplay season. But again, I have a lot of nostalgia for it, and that's enough for it to be here number 11. Now, number 10, a season that, again, went up one spot on the ranking here. Another season that some people don't like. I have always liked it. Very nostalgic season for me. At number 10, I have BB11. And BB11 is helped here in the fact that I actually just rewatched a supercut of BB11 not too long ago, to where it did really remind me of just how great certain aspects of the season are, to where, while again, it's another one, not a good gameplay season, not really that great of a player in sight on this season, but it's also a season that has so much drama, so much messiness. Again, Russell as a character is just purely insane TV. Shima is also there as a really great television personality. I mean, you got, again, these like two warring sides at the very beginning of the season, but even then it becomes a little bit more dynamic towards the end. And again, I get the criticism of, oh, the coup d'etat ruined the season and gave Jeff too much power, and yeah, I get it. Definitely something that feels like production putting their hands in the pot a bit, but I still think the Jesse eviction is still one of the best moments of the season. Also, the reaction to the Jesse eviction is still one of the best aspects of the season. And in general, again, I like the season BB11. I get why people don't. I do think it's a season that, again, if you're looking for gameplay, you're not going to get much of it here, but I do think there's, again, a lot of drama, a really fun split house dynamic, and one that, again, I have a lot of nostalgia for. And this is what got me back into Big Brother after having not watched BB's 9 and 10 live, to where, again, I have a lot of nostalgia for the season, and I think my re-experience watching a lot of clips from the show more recently kind of elevated the season in my mind, where, again, I have it above 13 here at number 10. Now, number 9, at number 9, we're getting into the truly elite seasons of Big Brother. And at number 9, we're starting it all off with a Big Brother Canada season. We have BBCAN 2. And BBCAN 2 is a season here that, my opinion of it, really went up after my latest rewatch of the season. I did rewatch it last year for my BBCAN 2 retrospective. And again, I love the season on the rewatch. I thought it was a season that, while, again, there are definitely some slower gameplay bits to the season, I do think it still remains consistently entertaining with a really likable cast. And still some drama along the way. I mean, I think the first few weeks are just purely insane with all the stuff Pop and Paul is doing. And again, you have like a really dynamic endgame stretch where, again, you have like the Arlie blindside, you have all this stuff from Sabrina and her being an incredible character. You have like the John and Netta dynamic, and again, essentially the fall of Netta is a really interesting moment. And in general, it's, again, a very consistent cast. I don't think there really is a like complete dud on the board that brings like nothing to the table outside maybe Rochelle, kind of. I think BBCAN 2 ages extremely well. I think it's definitely one of the better seasons on the board. It's here number 9. Now number 8, we're moving on to a season that has dropped down a spot, but largely just due to the fact that another season got added along the way. At number 8, I have BB20. And again, BB20 is a season that I loved at the time. I think if we're just looking on like how I felt about the season immediately after the season, BB20 is probably higher than the next season we'll be talking about. However, I do think BB20 is a season that also has a dreadful back portion of the season. The back third of the season is just so dull, where Tyler pretty much has the game on lock as by the time the Rockstar eviction, and there's not really much going on from like the final 7 on. Now again, the first half of the season is some of the best Big Brother we have ever seen. Again, the pre-jury phase, just insanity after insanity, round by round. Again, Brett staying over Winston, and the Rockstar's birthday is insane. We got Brett staying over Rachel, and the Rachel blindside just in general is insane. Again, Caitlyn losing the puzzle is insane. The Steve eviction at the last second is pretty insane. Swaggy's backdoor is insane. Beyond that, even like the Bailey week, there's a lot of insanity going on there. And obviously you have like Fessy putting up Scotty. And again, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on the first like 2/3 of the season. The back third, though, is just so dull. And I think that's what kind of harms the season as a whole. I think it's a season that, in comparison to the next one we'll be talking about, I think this season has higher highs, but I think that season's a bit more consistent, which is why I do have BB20 here, number 8. Now, number 7. Again, a season that I have not talked about before. Last season I haven't talked about before on the list. Most recent season of the show, we got BB26. And BB26, again, if we're taking out all the Canadian seasons, this is number 5 on my season ranking at this point. And we'll see how well it ages, but I do think, considering the events of the season, it's a very dynamic season. It's a season where through the first half of the season, we have so many like shifting dynamics in the game. Again, we have the Cedric blindside, which is, again, we have that entire insanity that is week 3 where Quinn almost gets backdoored and does kind of by the end, but then ends up staying. Again, obviously all of what Tucker's doing insane. We have the Cedric eviction, which is this big moment. We have the Tucker eviction, which is this big moment. Even the Joseph eviction ends up being this big moment. Again, the pre-jury phase of this season is very, very strong. Again, I don't think it hits the highest highs of BB20, but it is up there as one of the best pre-jury phases in the history of the show. And then the back portion of the season is consistently solid. Again, I think, there are probably, a little bit of slower points towards the end, but even then, there's something happening round by round. There was never a round where, nothing is happening. And to be fair, from a TV show perspective, you might think that, though, even then, again, Final 4 round, Final 5 round, there were these legitimate considerations to, take out Cam, which made a lot of that really interesting to watch. And again, I do think the back portion of the season is a lot more consistent than the likes of BB20. Also, I think the final result is a lot more palatable than the likes of BB20. Where, again, I do think BB26 is a season that I think is close to BB20. I think BB20 has higher highs. I think BB26, though, is more consistent throughout the entirety of it. So I think this is the new gold standard for modern Big Brother. I think this is the season that people are going to be mentioning as the best modern Big Brother season. We'll see how well it ages over time, but as of right now, I'm particularly high on the season. It's here, number 7. Now, number 6, and again, keeping with BBUS, we're actually keeping it for a bit, and just keeping in line with my old ranking, we got BB7. Now, I did debate BB7, BB26, and BB20. I think they're all around the same caliber. I think, in my opinion, BB7 is probably lower to most people, even though I still think BB7 is really great. I do think it's a season that is just a very consistently good season. I think it very rarely hits the highest highs Big Brother's ever had. I don't think it really has this individual moment that really stands tall in the Big Brother lexicon for me. Where again, I think things like the Rachel blindside, the Rockstar's daughter's birthday, the Crazy Eyes moment, the Cedric eviction, I think all these things stand a lot higher in Big Brother history than anything BB7 really has, outside of, I guess, just the general notion of Chilltown. But BB7 is, again, a very consistent season. There's not really a slow point throughout the entirety of it. Again, there's something happening constantly, and it is obviously an all-star cast of the show that, again, is an entertaining cast. And again, obviously, it's what really cements Dr. Will's legacy. You have this obviously a historic underdog run for Janelle and her winning comp after comp. And we get more of Daniel Reyes. We get, again, Boogie having a solid run. And it's a season that, again, I think is very solid. Again, there's not really much to truly criticize, but there's also, again, not really the high highs that you would want from the best all-time seasons, which is what, again, makes it a bit tough to rank it too much higher than this. But for now, I do have it here at number 6. Number 5, again, pretty much the epitome of old school Big Brother. We do have BB6. And BB6, again, is also kind of a tough season to rank because it is, again, one of the best seasons of the show. Fantastic drama throughout the entirety of it. Really insane characters, really big fights, really iconic moments, but also not much interesting gameplay. I think it's a season that the gameplay of the season is very mundane. It's simply just one side targeting the other. The only moment of really interesting gameplay happening is the Howie HOH where Maggie convinced him to put up James. I think that's the one moment that the gameplay ends up being really interesting. Outside that, it's simply just two sides targeting each other. Not much true intrigue with it. And also, again, with the pairs twist happening, also even Stifle's gameplay in terms of that, where they're obviously just going to nominate this pair together. To where, again, I think there are some kind of mundane aspects of the season to where, again, the gameplay is not interesting, but again, the characters are really great. And I think the entire saga of Kaser on this season is one of the most interesting arcs across any Big Brother season. And beyond that, you have, again, Janelle's underdog run throughout all of it, which is also really interesting as well. And while, again, it has a pretty lackluster result by the end where I don't think anyone's rooting for Maggie across the season, I think it's still a spot where it's such an entertaining ride with good character moments along the way. And also, again, I have a lot of nostalgia for the season, loving Kaser at the time. So again, it's enough to put it here at number 5. And number 4, again, the second best Big Brother US season, we do have BB14. And again, I think BB14 is kind of a tough season for me because I do think it's a season that, again, I have a lot of nostalgia for. This is where I got fully invested into the Big Brother community. So yeah, I have nostalgia in terms of that. Also beyond that, again, you have this incredible run for Dan. That ends up being this really interesting storyline across the season. Beyond that, again, I do get the criticisms of the season. Obviously, a weaker cast, or not the most interesting personalities for the most part. I mean, while you do have, again, the likes of Frank, Ian, there's also a good chunk of duds in there. But again, I still think it's a season that, again, has a lot of fights. Again, you have a lot of conflict with Frank in particular. Again, Frank and Willie, Frank and Ian. On that, you also have some really interesting gameplay. Again, Dan's run, especially in the jury phase on, is just some of the most riveting gameplay to watch. Him constantly having things go wrong from him and him having to recover from that, which, again, I think is really interesting to watch. And it's also a pretty consistent season. I think there's a couple weeks that might be a bit slower, but again, still a solid season with no real massive points where the season is dragging. To where, again, I think it's a very strong season, though to be fair, it is one that's very much uplifted by Dan. But again, I think that content's good enough to put it here at number 4. Now number 3, and again, 2 of the top 3 seasons here, and then being BBCAN. We have 1 BBUS season left. But at number 3, we're going to go to BBCAN. We got BBCAN 10. And BBCAN 10 is a season that I know some people say is the best BB season of all time. And to people that say that, I can get it. I think it's a very strong season, a very dynamic season. Again, Kevin Jacobs going on the win is just insanity with him playing the game very well. And again, another one of these situations like Dan, where again, he's kind of facing a lot of adversity and overcoming that. And that is interesting to see. I do think my issue with BBCAN 10 at this point is that I feel like a lot of it has not really stuck. While I do think if you rewatch the season, again, it is a very dynamic season. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on, though. I think as time goes on, I think my overall memory of it kind of fades away, not necessarily in terms of what actually happened in the week to week, but more so just in terms of like how highly I revere it, to where I do think as time goes on, I think the cast becomes one that maybe isn't the most notable in the world, where obviously, again, you got Kevin, you got like Betty, you got Summer, you have maybe Herman, Marty, but he's not likable. Again, early on, you have like Kyle Moore, but I don't know. I just think as a whole, the cast is not as notable for me personally in the grand scheme of things. And just in general, like the season is not really stuck with me as much as I think you would think it would, considering how great it is. To where, again, I think, again, we're at the top of the top. We're at the best seasons on the board. I just think for me, the top 2 seasons are 2 seasons that stick out for me more. I have more like positive memories of the season than when I look back at BBCAN 10, which again is still very good. Obviously the 3rd best season of all time, but still something feels a bit missing to not put it as the top 2, but still a very good season here at number 3. Now, number 2, again, we got a BBCAN season, we got a BBUS season. And I think I've said this in the past, and I stick by it. At number 2, I have BB10. BB10, very good season. Obviously, mostly renowned as the best BB season. I think most people online have that opinion, and again, I back that as well. I do think it's a really fun character season, a lot of big arguments, a lot of wacky characters on the season. Also, it's a very good gameplay season. For a while, I think only Dan is the truly like elite player on the cast. Again, I think that a lot of people are playing the game pretty hard, and even at points where, again, like the raw like boot order isn't that interesting, there's still interesting stuff going on. Again, the final 7 round is one that could have been a really boring round of gameplay, but again, Dan makes it really interesting with his nominations and replacement nominee roulette. You have a pretty interesting end game where like Dan's undercutting Memphis at every turn. You also have this very interesting early game. Again, this flip against Brian Hart is still a pretty insane thing to happen back in week 1. Now, also you have Keisha's birthday, the Jesse blindside. Again, there's so much to like from this season. I just think for me, I have more personal attachment to the number 1 season on the board, but I still think this season is very, very strong. Here at number 2. Number 1, best season of Big Brother for me personally is BBCAN 5. And again, BBCAN 5 is a season that is very strong when you look at it on paper. And while it is a half and half season, and again, some of the newbies are not the most riveting TV, it still has some really interesting dynamics happening across it. Again, the entire like Netta Ika feud that stems from it, obviously culminating in that double eviction, which is really insane. You have a pretty crazy first couple weeks, again, where Mark gets taken out in a 7-6 vote in week 1. You have Dallas's explosive exit from the game. You have, again, Cassandra and Gary going out, which, to be fair, that's a little bit of a whimper, but I do think the endgame stretch is still really interesting TV, where you really are able to keep a lot of the big characters for most of the season. And the fact that Evan Martin goes on this immunity run and through that has a really interesting arc towards the back portion of the season. You have, again, Ika and Dimitris, who play very solid games and are able to get all the way to the end as well. You have Karen, who is also an insane character, obviously the standout of the newbies and able to make it to the final 2. Well, also, again, you got a lot of drama along the way with Ika being Ika. You get some, again, crazy gameplay moments along the way as well, with Ika staying over Jackie. You have the triple, which was this really great moment even for Kevin's run. The final 5 is insane, where Kevin uses the veto on Ika. Again, there's a lot to like along the way. To where, well, I think it's a season that, on paper, I think you'll think it's probably less dynamic than the seasons that we just talked about. I think it is one that, again, really holds up when you watch the television product. And it's one that I loved at the time. And it's a season that I remember being very invested in where the season was going, with me rooting for like the Kevin, Bruno, Netta side of things, and Kevin winning at the end was a satisfying outcome to me, to where, again, I do think as a whole, I love BBCAN 5. I do think, like, on paper, again, probably BBCAN 10 is the better season, but I do think for me, BBCAN 5 stands out a bit more, and in general, I do look at this as my favorite Big Brother season, really, of all time. But that, again, that is my ranking, my updated North American Big Brother ranking. Now, and down the road, I do intend on redoing my North American winner ranking as well, so stay tuned for that. Obviously, just outside that, technical content from the channel, again, pretty much what you could expect, so stay tuned for all those things, but for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.